prompts from the internet and write stories around them. This is my first ever video, and the first complete story I have written in 18 years. I am pretty jazzed about it. However, I do apologize in advance. This video will be a little rough. Between nerves and dyslexia, I'm probably going to muck it up a few times. I hope you'll bear with me and stick it out. Today's story doesn't have a prompt. It was one of those random doom scrolling thoughts that sounded good. It is called The Curse of the Fairway Ticket. Let's go ahead and get started. Cold wind sliced through my threadbare sweater, and I curled into myself trying to find some kind of warmth. I stared at the ground, watching the shoes of people as they walked past me. A loud peal of laughter startled me into looking up, and I inwardly groaned at the sight of teenagers walking towards me. Their leader sneered at me when we made eye contact. Seems like somebody didn't learn her lesson about begging here. She kneeled in front of me, her face contorted in disgust. Admittedly, I knew how I looked and smelled. When I ran away, I imagined it would be more glamorous than it turned out to be, but there was no going back. I had no family, and I'd left behind a string of terrible foster homes. The girl in front of me cocked her head to one side, studying me with a sick curiosity. Suddenly she stood up and patted my head. "Stay here, puppy, and be a good girl, and I'll bring you some food." She laughed at her own joke before turning and motioning for her lackeys to follow her into the grocery store. Dread warred with the cold as another shiver shook me. I adjusted my sign that said, "Hungry, food would help, but a job would be better." Most people didn't want to hire an 18-year-old with no experience or ID. I went back to studying the sidewalk, partially listening for toxic laughter. I didn't have to wait long before her shoes entered my line of vision. I didn't look up, but I didn't try and shrink away either. Before I could register what was happening, cold liquid hit the top of my head, and I watched chocolate milk run down my face into my lap. I thought that was it. There couldn't possibly be anything more humiliating than that, but I underestimated her. Next, she threw a cheeseburger-shaped dog toy at my feet. "There you go, puppy, your food." She spit at me before walking away, laughter echoing loudly in my head until it became a booming roar. I was so thoroughly humiliated. People stopped and looked at me with a mix of pity and embarrassment. I was gathering my sign and the cardboard I'd been sitting on when an elderly woman stopped in front of me. "Oh, honey, let's get you cleaned up." Her voice held the warmth of a grandma and anger on my behalf. She struggled to kneel, and she pulled a pack of baby wipes from her purse and handed them to me. "Some people are animals. Don't worry, the universe will set it right," she said gently. "I stopped believing that a long time ago," I said, suddenly more tired than I'd ever been. "I know it's hard to keep going when you feel like you're at rock bottom." She patted my hand. "But the good news is, it's only up from here." "If you say so," I muttered. "I do, because I can help with both of your problems." She motioned for me to start cleaning, and she set down her bag and dug through it for a moment before yelling, "Aha!" She held out a carnival ticket. "Here you go, baby." Thank you, but I don't have the kind of money that a carnival would cost." She looked at me puzzled before she understood. "Oh, no. I was given this lifetime ticket because I was the 500th person to visit. But I really think they gave it to me because I have one foot in the grave and they won't have to pay out for very long." She laughed at her own joke. "This is unlimited food, unlimited rides for life, and I saw a help wanted sign in the ticket window." She pressed the ticket into my hand. I stared at it, tears burning my eyes. "Why would you give this to me?" "Well, I can only handle so much of the carnival. It's really lost on me. Besides, you're young. You'll get more out of it than I will." She patted my hand again. "How about you come into the store with me? We can get you some new clothes, get you cleaned up as much as possible." She struggled to stand, and I jumped to help her. She was so frail and small, but despite her age, she had a fast shuffle. Before I knew it, I was standing in the bathroom with a new sweatshirt, pants, socks, underwear, and shoes. She'd even brought me a backpack to carry everything in. She pinched my cheek and winked at me before she shuffled out of my life. I awkwardly washed myself as much as I could with hand soap. I dried my body with paper towels and wrung my hair out in the sink. I used the hand dryer to dry my hair as much as possible before I put on the new clothes, and I felt like a completely different person. The outside world felt different too. Maybe it was because the cold couldn't penetrate the sweater. Maybe it was the possibility of finally making my way up in the world. I walked past the box I'd been sitting on and my sign, leaving that part of me there. The carnival was on the outskirts of town, where the grass was non-existent and trash blew in the parking lot. I walked up to the ticket booth, noticing their handwritten help wanted sign. A bleary-eyed woman peered at me through thick glasses. "Just one today?" Her voice was clipped. "Actually, I have a lifetime pass, but I'm here to apply for the job," I said, pointing to the sign. She narrowed her eyes. "You have a lifetime pass?" I nodded and pulled it out of my pocket. She took it from me and inspected it before handing it back. "All right, come on in. I'll call the boss to come do an interview. You can sit in here until he gets here." She motioned for me to come around to the back door of the ticket booth. I stepped through the gate, feeling like I was stepping into my future. A wave of exhaustion swept through me, and I was glad for the opportunity to sit. The walk had taken longer than I thought it would. The woman opened the door and pointed me to a chair. "Liam will be here in a minute. He's the manager," she said while opening a book. So far, it seemed like it would be a really boring job, but I wouldn't turn it down. I sat quietly for about 5 minutes, and a knock came to the door. A short, bald man poked his head in. He looked me up and down before he reached his hand towards me, and I shook it, introducing myself. "I hear you're looking for a job," he said. I had to strain to hear him. He was so soft-spoken. "Yes, sir, I am," I smiled, though my heart was pounding. "All right, walk with me, and I can explain things to you." He turned away and started walking. I rushed after him. "I will tell you about the duties while I show you around. You won't just be sitting in the booth all the day. That is a common misconception, which leads people only making it a day or two before they bounce. I am a hard worker, and I desperately need this job." Liam gave me a sideways glance. "Yeah, that's what they've all said." That shut me up. I listened as Liam detailed how it would be my job to keep the bathrooms cleaned and stocked in the employee break room, and at the end of the day, everybody would walk through the park to pick up trash. The Fairway opens at 1 p.m. Once it opens, you will regularly rotate through the games and rides to see if anyone needs a break for food or bathroom. We close down at 1 a.m., though the cleaning duties will take us to about 3. "Fairway? I thought this was a carnival," I said lamely. He laughed. "Technically it's called a carnival, or a fair, but the lane of games and food trucks is called the Fairway. Nisa told me you have a lifetime ticket." I nodded and handed it to him. "Well, when you're on shift, your food and drink is free. Within reason, of course. Can't drink alcohol, obviously, and you can have up to 3 meals while on shift. So your ticket would be useful for your days off. Staff also has housing in the back. If you need a room, there are options. But we mostly all bunk together like roommates," he said before handing my ticket back. "That would be amazing, actually," I said, hope making my chest expand for the first time in months. "Fantastic. Let's get the paperwork done and you can join Nisa for the day for training." He motioned toward a door labeled as office and walked inside. All previous hope deflated. This is where I had to tell him I had no birth certificate, no ID, and he gets mad at me that I wasted his time. I followed him, dejected. My shoulders slouched. I sat in the chair opposite him at the desk. He stared at me for a long moment. "So you want to explain how you went from excited to sad face in 2.5 seconds?" he asked while tapping his pen on the desk. "I am an orphan. Technically a runaway, I guess. I was 2 years from aging out of the system when I ran away. I have no ID or birth certificate." I waited for his anger with my head down. "Is that it?" he asked. I looked up sharply. Yeah, isn't that kind of important?" He laughed. It's not hard to get copies of that. We have some employees who are paid cash because they don't have paperwork either. But won't I need to pay taxes? He shrugged. Yes, you should. But in the meantime, you can still work for me, and I'll try and get a hold of someone to find your paperwork. Easy peasy. He handed me a pen and pulled a paper from his desk. This is an employment agreement. You will start at $12 an hour and be paid weekly. You will be responsible for your own belongings, and you will be assigned a trailer with a roommate. It will be up to the both of you to discuss your own household chores and responsibilities, like groceries and stuff. You are not required to pay rent, but all of the employees pitch in for utilities for the whole Fairway. We are fair in our billing, I promise. Do you have transportation? I shook my head. I use public transport when possible. He nodded. Okay, I'll have your roommate come introduce himself later, and you can talk about all that with them. My hand shook. It was finally happening, the first step into getting my life in order. I signed the paper, we shook hands, and he sent me back to the ticket booth to learn the ropes. I left the office with the biggest grin on my face. If I had only known I had just signed my life away. The first day, Nisa gently explained every aspect of the job. The point-of-sale system was pretty self-explanatory, except for when it went down and I had a mild panic attack while a line formed. Nisa explained this happens sometimes. That's why there's always 2 people taking tickets. I asked why the owner did not buy better equipment, and she said he would rather put money back into the business, maintaining the rides, upgrading the food trucks, and employee housing. By the end of the first hour, I was sure it would be the easiest job in existence. Halfway through my shift, my roommate came to the booth to introduce himself. He said his name was Razor, and he kind of looked like he belonged in a motorcycle gang. Nisa told me to take my stuff up to our house and get settled. She said it would be considered my first break of the day. Razor gently took my backpack and led me through the Fairway. Have you had something to eat yet? He asked. I shook my head, my stomach rumbling. He pointed to a turkey leg truck, and the man behind the counter looked up at us. Razor held up 2 fingers. The man nodded, coming back to the window with 2 giant turkey legs. We thanked him, and off we went again. I was almost halfway through mine when we reached the housing campus. Single-wide trailers lined both sides of a paved road. Each one had a small fenced yard and a driveway. I smiled a little at the thought of my first home in over 2 years. Razor walked to the 3rd trailer on the left. The window shutters were painted a cheery yellow. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. Inside was warm, inviting, and clean. He set my backpack by the door and led me through the house. Pointing to a hallway, there are 3 rooms down that way. Choose whichever one you want. My room is the master bedroom off the kitchen. There is a washer and dryer in the alcove between my room and the kitchen, and all of the stuff is there. I will get you a set of keys made tomorrow, but for tonight I will come back after you're finished with your end-of-night duties. Do you have a phone? He asked. I shook my head. I've been on the streets for a couple of years now. I only have one other set of clothes, and they really don't hold up well. Embarrassment flooded my system, and I stared down at my shoes. Been there. Don't worry, we'll get it all figured out. Did Liam explain about the 2-week probation period? He put his own phone back in his pocket, and I nodded. Cool. Well, it's nice to meet you. What did you say your name was? I grinned. I didn't, but you can call me Reggie. I held out my hand. You're going to need a better carny name if you make it past 2 weeks. But for now, Reggie suits you, he said as he shook my hand. I put the rest of my food in the fridge, and we locked up the house before walking back. I made it back to the booth and continued with my day. 1 a.m. finally dragged on, and I was bone tired. True to his word, Razor met me at the end of the night and walked me back to the housing complex. He handed me a phone. What is this? I asked. Don't get your panties in a twist. It's just a prepaid phone. You can pay me back when you get paid. It was only $50. You have to keep minutes on it yourself, though. I programmed everybody's numbers in it already. You just need anything, you text them. But I only know you, Nisa, and Liam, I said. You'll meet everyone else throughout the week. Now get some sleep. Morning shift sneaks up quickly. Thank you, I said on a yawn, and I shuffled my way down the hall. I picked the last bedroom closest to the bathroom and opened the door. There was a full-size bed, a dresser, and a desk. It was absolutely perfect. I kicked off my shoes and fell into bed. I was asleep before my head hit the pillow. The week felt like it flew by while simultaneously dragging on. I learned that unlike most carnivals, this one was not a traveling one. Most days were slow, but usually business picked up after school let out. Finally, payday arrived. Liam found me in the afternoon and handed me an envelope. Here you go, Reggie. A little less than what a normal paycheck would be because you started after the pay period started. I also got in touch with someone from your hometown. They are sending me your birth certificate. After that, we can get your social security card and put you on the official paperwork. Razor will help you determine your share of the utilities and take you to town to get whatever you need. I took the envelope with shaking hands, my first ever paycheck. I held back tears as I thanked him. Oh, before I forget, you have Saturdays off. Use your unlimited ticket as many times as you want on that day for rides and food. He patted my shoulder and walked away. I decided to rush home during the lull and put my money in a safe place. I didn't trust people enough to walk around with an envelope full of cash. When I returned to the ticket booth, my stomach dropped. Standing in line was the girl who poured chocolate milk on me and her crew. Her eyes lit up with malicious joy when she saw me. Puppy! I've been wondering where you've been. You ran away from your usual spot. Bad dog, she grinned. Nisa looked from her to me. Problem, Reg? She asked softly. I shook my head. Just a mean girl. She isn't worth the distraction. Nisa gave the group their tickets, and the girl blew me a kiss before walking past my booth. I realized I was no longer nervous about her presence anymore. I was in a much better place mentally. As the day wore on, I put the girl out of my mind. The sun started setting and the sky had been a beautiful mix of blue and orange when the girl and her friends walked out. She turned to give me a finger wave as she stepped off the curb, but she was struck by a car before she could fully turn around. Tires screeched, and a sick thunk could be heard before she landed about 20 feet away. Her body was twisted unnaturally, and her fingers twitched for a few seconds before they stopped. Her friends and the other people who witnessed it started screaming. The driver got out and kept saying the sun was in his eyes, he didn't see her. I hurriedly dialed 911 and gave them the location. The carnival shut down for the night while paramedics tried unsuccessfully to resuscitate her, and she was eventually covered with a sheet and taken away. The following days carried an air of hollowness. A vigil had been set up on the sidewalk. There were so few customers that we all did busy work. The park was cleaner than I'd ever seen it. All of the rides were inspected. The food trucks were deep cleaned, and before I knew it, I was down to the last day before my 2-week probation was up. I knew that I wanted to stay. After talking to everyone, I come to realize at some point they had all been homeless as well. I just hoped the owner would offer me permanent work. I was behind the Ferris wheel trying to grab a nylon flag that had gotten tangled in the fence when my hand slipped and I fell backwards. I felt a sharp stabbing pain in my leg and I looked down to see a piece of fence sticking up. Blood poured out of my leg. I stood up and hobbled toward the first aid office. My head felt fuzzy and the edges of my vision started to blur. I shook my head to clear away the cobwebs when it all suddenly stopped. My vision cleared and the pain was gone. I looked down. There was no rip in my pants anymore. I pulled up my pant leg to reveal completely unbroken skin. What in the fluffernutter? I whispered. I looked around, but nobody was paying attention to me. I speed-walked back to the fence. There was no broken pieces, no blood on the ground, and the flag was still entangled. I stood there for a few minutes trying to process before I chalked it up to temporary insanity. As I walked back, still thinking about it, Liam stopped me. Hey, Reggie, the owner would like to talk to you. For now, you can follow me. He had a warm smile on his face, which gave me hope. I followed, my stomach in knots. I had already come to love this place and the people. I didn't know what I would do if they told me I wouldn't work out here. Well, if I was being honest with myself, I would absolutely fall on my knees and beg. I followed Liam to the very last trailer in the housing complex. Before we got to the door, he stopped and gave me a grim look. The owner is very sick. Please don't stare at him and only answer direct questions. He can't have a good conversation before he gets tired. I nodded my understanding. Liam walked up the stairs before knocking and opening the door. The first thing I noticed when I walked in was the strong smell of antiseptic cleaner. The living room was devoid of all furniture except for the hospital bed. Various machines beeped and flashed. A nurse came in and smiled at us. She gently shook the man awake and raised the head of the bed so he could sit up. His eyes were glazed, but after a moment or two he smiled and held his hand out to Liam. They shook hands. His gaze locked on me and he wheezed a weak hello. I awkwardly waved and stepped closer to hear him speak better. I've heard great things about you. From all accounts, you have a strong work ethic. You're kind and helpful all the time. Do you want a permanent job here? He asked. His voice cracked and he coughed. A deep gurgling sounded in his chest, and the nurse rushed over to put an oxygen mask on him. Another human? Really, Wesley? You collect them like living trophies. You give them so much, but they can't help you. They are worthless. A stern voice carried from across the room. I looked towards the hallway and saw a white cat sitting there glaring at me. I raised an eyebrow. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. You're so beautiful. I made kissing noises. He rolled his eyes. Gross. Why do humans do that? I stepped back. There was no way that cat just talked. The cat looked at me sharply. You can understand me? I nodded and took another step towards the door. Stop. Please stay, Wesley called from the bed. He reached his hand out towards me and I tentatively took it. He turned my hand over and looked at my palm. Leave us, he whispered. Surprised, Liam tried to protest, but Wesley glared at him. Liam bowed his head. Both he and the nurse left the living room. Wesley patted my hand. We have been waiting for you a long time. Your Highness. His eyes filled with tears. I'm not royalty, I said. The white cat jumped on the bed, sitting on the corner closest to me. He stared at me. Well, actually, it felt like he was staring into my soul. His head tilted a little. You really don't know what you are, do you? I've never known my family. How are you able to talk? Can everyone hear you? Wesley made a strangled laughing sound. He's a familiar. He's my familiar. And has been with me for a very long time now. Only those of witch's bloodline can have them, but they can't be heard by anyone other than the witch they have connection with. You can hear him because of the prophecy. This is where I decided I didn't really need this job. Now that I had work experience and all of my legal documents, I could go somewhere else. Right. You know what? I've changed my mind. I don't think this is a good fit, and I will just go pack and be off. Thank you for the opportunity. I turned to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. I looked down. My feet were completely encased in the carpet. I screamed. I could feel my heart rate kick up and my hands starting to shake. I expected Liam and the nurse to come running after I screamed, but it was like they didn't hear me at all. I looked around frantically, trying to find a way out. The cat calmly walked into my line of vision. Are you done? His bored tone ignited my anger. Let me go! This isn't funny, he snorted. It kinda is. You look like a mermaid out of water, sort of flopping around. Or maybe you're a newborn giraffe. I can't decide. Look, just let me go. I'll leave town. I won't tell anybody about any of this, I promise, I pleaded. The cat licked his paw. You can't leave. The only people who can hear a familiar are the witch they bond with and those of the royal line. And according to a prophecy, a powerful witch from the royal line will break the curse on Wesley. Curse? I glanced behind me. I didn't have a clear sight on Wesley, but I could see the heart monitor. "Oh, look who just got interested," the cat said. "Just because I'm curious doesn't mean I'm the witch that you say I am," I snapped. Look, you gave your agreement to stay on. Technically, that is a verbal contract, so you can't leave. From here on out, you will be bound to the property until we can figure all of this out." The carpet that was covering my feet suddenly settled back onto the floor, and I fell to my knees, feeling more tired and powerless than I ever had. My dream to have my own home and job now felt like the most suffocating prison. Tears slid down my cheeks. "How long will that be?" "I don't know, Your Highness, but nothing will change. Well, except you'll not be able to work. You're going to be confined to your trailer until we can trust you not to run off." I gasped. "But you just said I wouldn't be able to leave the property, so surely you have magic to keep me on site." I put the last bit in air quotes. My sorrow heaped in my chest. "Of course we do. Did you not just hear the part where I said a very powerful witch? God, talking to you is worse than talking to a brick wall. Have you ever had any serious head injuries? Were you perhaps dropped on your head when you were a baby? Or are you just dumb?" he hissed. "You are such a rude cat, and I usually like cats." "Ooh, burn," he said with an eye roll. His tail swished. "Fact of the matter is, you're stuck for now. Razor will be both your bodyguard and our eyes, so mind yourself. Oh, and the name is Alistair." "I don't particularly care what your name is." I stood and walked to the door. I opened it, preparing to run, but stopped short when I saw Razor standing there. My shoulders slumped. I really had no way out. The days passed until I could no longer remember which day it was. Every day was the same. Get up, walk around the house listlessly, sometimes eating my feelings, and alternating between pleading and yelling at Razor to just let me go outside, or open the window so I could feel the sun. He was immune to my tears and my anger. He once caught me with my phone trying to get a signal. He told me that the blanket spell they had put over the house prevented cell service. I became a shell of my former self. Even the foster homes I had been bounced to were never this isolating. I couldn't figure out what the end game was. I decided it was time to ask Alistair about the curse, the prophecy, and my expected role in all of it. I came out of my room and saw Razor at the kitchen table. "All right, can you call Alistair? I just want to get to the bottom of all of this." Razor looked up, narrowing his eyes before he nodded. He used his work radio to put in the call, and 2 seconds later, Alistair strode into the house. "Done pouting?" he asked. I gave a slight nod and sat on the floor. "Tell me everything, please." Alistair cleared his throat. "Once upon a time," he chuckled, "a very, very long time ago, Wesley was dating a woman. Not just any woman, but a goddess. She was beautiful, formidable, and very, very vengeful. She never thought twice about the villagers she would smite or punish because they wronged her. You would think, knowing that, Wesley would have worshipped the ground she walked on, and for a while he did, until he became so high on the power he got from being her lover, he decided he could do better, and be better than she ever was. She caught him cheating, not just with anyone, but the one villager who had incurred her wrath more than anyone. This villager was very outspoken about the goddess and her abuse of power. She convinced more and more people to turn away from this goddess. In her rage, she decimated the whole village and mutilated the woman. But she saved her most torturous curse for Wesley. She cursed him with immortality and the power he so desperately craved, but he would have no way to save himself. Every year he would slowly wither away, close enough to death that he would see her face, but never enough to end his misery. Once he saw her face, he would sit with it for 3 months, and then he would be restored to full health. Before she banished him from her realm, she told him that only someone with the blood of a royal line of witches could break this curse, and he would never find them. Wesley, uncaring of the curse, again high on his power, walked through his life enjoying anything and everything. But after a few millennia did he begin to doubt if this was ever what he really wanted. He begged endlessly for her to remove the curse, but to no avail. He built this carnival as a way to bring in crowds, with hope that one day his savior would come, and now you have. My mouth hung open. Exactly, how old are you? Older than I can remember, he said wearily. I am sorry that you have both suffered for so long, but I still don't understand where I come in. I have no knowledge of witchcraft or curses. I especially have no idea how to break one. Never mind one that was put on by a literal goddess. Alistair shrugged. Wait, can cats shrug? We don't know either. Wesley and I are going through tomes and texts, trying to find anything to point us in the right direction. In the meantime, I'm stuck here as a prisoner, I asked. Prisoner has such a terrible connotation. More like a very valued and heavily guarded guest. We don't want anything to happen to you. He tried to sound reasonable, but it came out patronizing. I sighed heavily. Sure, let's go with that. He walked up to me and put a paw on my leg. Don't worry, we'll figure this out. And then he poofed out of the house. I sat there blinking, unwilling to accept that he had just disappeared like that. I felt the air around where he last was, but he really did vanish. Well, that was enlightening. I'm going to go ahead and take a nap and think about all of this. I walked back to my room and laid down. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours before I was finally able to close my eyes. I slept fitfully. Part of me felt bad for Wesley, but I still didn't know if I would be helpful. I formulated a plan of escape. I knew that whatever I decided to do would definitely change my life. Nevertheless, I still tried. I walked to the kitchen the next day, telling Razor that I wanted to make dinner. I rummaged through the fridge and found ingredients for chicken fajitas. I went to grab a knife to chop the vegetables, but Razor grabbed my arm. No knives, he said. Why? I asked. He gave me a look that told me I should already know the answer. Oh my God, you think I'm going to kill myself? I gasped. He gently took the knife and set about cutting the vegetables. Unfortunately for him, I expected that. I retrieved the heavy cast iron skillet from the cabinet, wrapped both hands around the handle like a bat, and swung with everything I had. There was a sick crunch, and he crumpled to the floor. I am so sorry, I whispered before I ran to my room, grabbing my stash of money, my phone, and shoving clothes in my backpack. I knew I wouldn't be able to leave by the front door, so I ran back through the house to the master bathroom, and there was a window that opened into the alley. Thankfully, night was falling, and the carnival was busy enough that I should be able to leave without anyone knowing. By the time I got to the bus station, night had completely fallen. I went up to the window and paid for a ticket, the cheapest one I could get as far away as possible. I settled onto a seat and finally allowed myself to relax a little bit. Once the bus started pulling out of the station, I leaned my head back, so finally ready to be done with all of this. Suddenly the bus stopped and I opened my eyes. I looked around for the reason, but I couldn't see anything. I stood up and looked out the windshield. In the middle of the street stood Razor, and he was holding a very angry Alistair in his arms. Their eyes locked onto mine, and I gripped the top of the seat until my fingers turned white. Every seat was occupied, and every head simultaneously turned towards me as they chanted, "Get off the bus," over and over, until their cadence began to hurt my ears. I put my hands over my ears and screamed, "No!" Their voices rose until I couldn't take it anymore, and I ran off the bus. Razor and Alistair met me at the doors. Roughly, Razor grabbed my arm. Alistair hissed and scratched my face. "You're a coward!" I was dragged to the car and shoved to the back seat. Once the door was closed, I pulled on the handle, but it wouldn't open. "Child gauge is unlocked," Razor said without a backward glance. The ride back to the carnival was tense, but I had hope that it wasn't closed yet and I could scream for help. I pulled out my phone, but it wouldn't turn on. I felt defeated. How could so many things go wrong at one time? I glared at the back of Razor's head. "I thought you were dead. I swung that skillet pretty hard." He chuckled. "I'm a lot harder to kill than you think." We pulled into the parking lot of the carnival and it was completely empty. All of the rides were dark. Only the lights were left on. Why is the park closed? My breath hitched. I simultaneously became overheated and cold, worry gnawing at my insides. Something was very, very wrong. We had to track down an errant child, and we have business to finish, Alistair said coldly. The way he said it made my stomach drop, and I knew this was not going to end well for me. Razor dragged me from the car, keeping hold of my arm as he dragged me through the gates to the center of the park. Everyone was gathered, all looking at me with different shades of pity and disgust. These people who had become my friends, my family. I pleaded with them for help, but they all ignored me. I was roughly pushed into the middle of the gathering, and they all stood together, forming a circle. I refused to participate in whatever they had planned. I turned in a circle, looking at every face, hoping for some kind of softness and warmth. My heart was beating so hard, and fear choked my voice. I ran full force at Nessa, throwing my weight against her, causing her to stumble to the side. I ran as far as I could. Suddenly I couldn't breathe, and my eyes were filled with a red haze. I wiped my eyes to find blood on my fingers. I clutched my chest, gasping for air. Strong arms wrapped around me from behind, and I was carried back to the circle. Nisa slapped me as hard as I was carried past. I was dropped to the ground and turned over onto my back with my arms spread to the side. Pain lanced through my fingers as Liam used a knife to cut each one from palm to tip. I was finally able to breathe, but the blood kept haze over my vision. Why are you doing this? I screamed, sobs racking my body. Alistair stepped onto my chest and looking at me in the eyes. I told you, royal blood, he said like it was the most logical thing. Surely you don't have to kill me to break the curse, I pleaded. Oh, right. We broke that curse thousands of years ago. He leapt off of me and transformed into a tall man with slightly greasy white hair, black eyes, and an evil grin. What? I whispered. Wesley was a hired actor. He thought we were filming a TV show, and I have to say, he was pretty convincing. I am the one that cheated on the goddess. That story was true. But I wasn't the only one cursed. Our whole village was. In fact, this is where our village originally was. You see, the goddess did give us immortality and power. And yes, for a while we would become deathly ill. She might have been vengeful, but she was also prideful and smug. Her arrogance became the one thing that allowed us to kill her and set ourselves free. By then we were accustomed to the thought of living forever and came up with ways to keep that. Our spell work, combined with untapped witch essence, keeps us young, keeps the rides, the food trucks, and the business all in tip-top shape, he said while lovingly smiling at every face there. He checked his watch and snapped his fingers. The circle of people grabbed hands, lifting their faces to the sky, and started softly chanting, "Your blood really is from a royal line, and your sacrifice will ensure that we can go another 100 years before we have to do another bloodletting ceremony. You were a really hard one to break. I thought I almost had you whenever the blonde died. God, she was annoying." The chanting grew louder, and I could feel my blood flowing out of my fingers, my eyes, and my nose. I turned my head and watched my blood spread out from my body in little streams, each stream going to different areas of the park. My mind began to feel foggy. I was so tired. The rides began to light up, their music louder than I'd ever heard it, and they all looked brand new. The tall slide gleamed in the moonlight like it had just been waxed. The chrome on the food trucks sparkled, no more rust. Awnings repaired themselves, no longer frayed and sun-bleached. I looked at the faces of those around me and saw they had all looked to be in their early 20s. They were all smiling joyfully, hugging each other and laughing. Noises began to fade away. I turned my head to look at the sky, watching the stars twinkle. The edges of my vision started to turn black, and I vaguely heard a small voice in my head whisper, "Thank you." My eyes closed. My breath struggled one last time, and all that was left was the slow, sensual kiss of death. The end. Look at that, guys. I made it. And you did too. Hey, congratulations. Thanks for staying so much. I really appreciate it. I hope to post twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I am running a little bit behind, so next week will probably only be once before I'm back on track. You can leave me a comment on any prompt, whether it be dialogue, character, or theme, or setting, and I will try to incorporate it into a story. Again,